My name is Abiola Azeez. On behalf of myself and Tosin Adeate, I will be presenting the paper Trust Norms for Generative AI Data Gathering in the African Context, submission code DAP 20230169.R1 at the Data for Policy Conference 2024, Imperial College London from July 9th to 11th, 2024. The outline first, we're going to be talking about providing a narrative about data gathering challenges in Africa for generative AI. I'm going to be answering the question, what does generative AI mean in the African setting? Is knowledge in the African context generative AI data worthy? And we're going to be providing some recommendations regarding trust norms for generative AI data collector in African setting. So first, data gathering challenges in Africa for generative AI, the narrative. So we know that data is a critical infrastructure necessary to build an AI system. It requires a lot of data to build AI system, particularly generative AI, in the context of this research. And but then while gathering data is a universal challenge, but minimal in certain non-African regions like the EU, the US, China, Canada, and some part of Middle East, it is a more deep-seated issue in the African context for various reasons, subsumed under the lack of a structured data ecosystem. You have, Ade, Ibijola Okoko, 2023 argue, and with this are some specific implications. And so a lack of, structured data ecosystem, what exactly are we talking about? We're talking about data not reflecting the demographic variables of a targeted location, right? And this could also be interpreted as data mismatch with demographic variables. We're talking about data cascades, compounding events, causing negative downstream effects from data issues, resulting in technical debts over time. We're talking about inadequate information. We're talking about data shortages in Africa, which might of course result in the unavoidable and implication in African context. We're talking about oversimplification of reality variables. We're talking about real world deviations. We're talking about unrealistic assumptions. We're talking about risk of biases. We're talking about a potential limited predictive power, and some of these implications further include, interpreting the data cascade as lack of data quality, unavailability of digital data, cost-induced data hoarding, data sets inaccessibility, anecdotal data, and on, and the inability of the government to guarantee data security in Africa. So with all of this, we thought about, given all of these implications and the problems, how do we then build a robust generative AI, for the African audience? But the first question I want to ask is, what does generative AI mean in the African setting? This is a difficult question, we must say. And, for various reasons, but one is that even the notion of generative AI isn't clear yet. On the theoretical conceptual framing level, it's not clear whether we're talking about a not seen before content or a not seen before technology. But this is not the focus of this paper, but then so we'll leave that to future research endeavors. Second reason why this question is difficult is because the consequences of using AI in a purely African context, the consequences are under researched. So much of the work done on AI in the African setting is, could or may or have always been about how to make AI African, not necessarily consequences. It's about how to design it, how to make sure that it reflects Afro values. So we can't talk about the consequences yet because we're still in the process of trying to, as some people would say, Africa is still in the kitchen. We're still in the process of, trying to say, okay, this is what our design template values and principles should look like, so this leaves us with a huge gap, the consequences of using the AI. So we can't at this point tell yet what the consequences will be like when we begin to use AI built by Africans for Africans to serve African purposes and meet African needs. At this point, we don't know what the consequences are yet. And so, but then, as we said, much of the work focusing on the design principles, Afro design principles, Afro principles, and all of that. So, for more than half a decade, the debate within the Afro cultural consideration of AI is focused on how designing AI for the African audience may not embrace Afro extension norms such as communality, togetherness, and brotherhood. To provide a brief literature review, works like misalignment between second wave AI and Afro extension norms, marginalization of non-Western knowledge systems in the study of AI ethics. In more recent times, it has been about, issues of algorithm colonization of Africa, the importance of local data and knowledge, empowering local talents, and technological colonialism. So, but then we inferred that generative AI in general, generally speaking, is non-relational, non-communal, non-collective, and as such would not reflect some of the core characteristics of African thoughts. And this would imply that generative AI, as we have it in the world today, lacks existential, moral, and epistemic grounding in the African setting because it is viewed from a Western point of view, where principles like individuality and the self, influence design choices and decisions, right? And so we're saying that an African tailored generative AI would mean to the African audience a technology that can interact at the esoteric and exoteric levels of knowledge, right? In other words, it must possess data that is both suitable to adapt to the public and to a closed small society. I will get into that in a bit. So, but then, is knowledge in African context generative AI data worthy? What exactly are we talking about here? We're talking about knowledge in its two main forms: esoteric, which of course has been recently conceptualized as epistemic occlusion. But then speaking about data, we refer to raw facts, observations, measurement values that have little meaning, or it could be the basic building block of information, and it is typically in various formats such as numbers, text, images, speech, and so on, right? And epistemology generally, regarded as a theory of knowledge. It concerns what we know, the nature of knowledge, and the process leading to it. And so what exactly is epistemology in the African context? So what should we be looking for when it comes to conceptualizing epistemology in the African context? We're talking about the idea of community plays a crucial role when it comes to justification. In other words, justification isn't individualistic. Justification is rather communal. It is as a result of synthesizing the view of the people living in the community. And the idea of communalism is, of course, an essential reference in understanding African epistemology. There is usually a reference. What makes it knowledge is that what makes the knowledge justifiable is that it has a referential standing, in the community. And so to further say, communalism also involves idea of interconnectedness, right? And some of the questions raised is, would we respect and protect individual autonomy, in a communal setting? I mean, following up on this, there's been a question of how do we even analyze collective wisdom into data? I mean, because everything is interconnected, it's communalism. There is no subjective referential point. It has to be collective referential points. How do we do all of these things? Particularly when we want to build a generative AI for the African audience, a robust, inclusive generative AI for the African audience. How do we even do this? But beyond this, there is a problem that outweighs even this question. And it is the fact that The notion of sacredness suggests that there might be a conflict between data as information units and data gathered in the African setting, specifically anecdotal data, which is, of course, data gotten from words of mouth or first person point of view and all of that. And this is owing to the assumption that not all data in the African setting is to be made available for public consumption. In reality, some data would be regarded as exclusive to a small circle of people, referencing epistemic occlusion as espoused by Fayemi rather and Azeez in 2021. A work carried out focusing on Barry Allen's work. And so, given all of this, how do we then, what exactly is the main challenge of a data collector in the African setting, considering the lack of structured data ecosystem, considering the fact that there might be some data in the African society that not, exclusive to the public and not adaptable to the public? How do we build a robust, inclusive, generative AI system tailored for an African society when some data referred to as esoteric data are not adaptable to the public? This leaves us with a big problem, and we are proposing that the main challenge is both forms of knowledge, right? But specifically, the esoteric form of knowledge, which as we have here, as epistemic occlusion, which refers to reserving knowledge to certain individuals who usually belong to close and secret associations, as we said earlier on. And of course, putting the question right in front of you, how do you build generative AI on exoteric data only, excluding esoteric? So we believe that such norms, like first norms, so we believe that what has to be done is to build trust between the data collector and the custodians of this esoteric and exoteric levels or forms of knowledge in the African traditional society. So we are saying that these norms might help to interact with these custodians. And but then what are these norms? What must a generative AI collector do? Generative AI data collector do? First, they must work to understand customary practices in African society. Very, very important. You need to demonstrate that you possess customary practices in African society, and which of course can inspire confidence in this custodians to say that yes, we know that you know these things, and then we can come to terms with you and share information with you. And secondly, establish technology groups supported by indigenous funding. There is a new speak in the traditional African side that says, put your money where your mouth is. Pretty much to say that when you invite the indigenous to fund technology groups and projects, it helps them to be participatory of these initiatives, and they can begin to open up when it comes to sharing esoteric data information. And the joint verification, this is about partnership. This is about making sure that you settle into the spirit of Afro-existential practices, which involves togetherness and interconnectedness. So joint verification, crucial. It is very, very crucial for a generative AI data collector. And then affirming sacredness of information, that the data collector must be able to draw the sacred line between information that is sacred and not sacred, and should know how to treat them differently and uniquely, for different situations. Very, very important. And recalibrating trust norms and adapting technology integrations and shaping African AI. We know that some norms are not applicable anymore in current times now that we live in a contemporary world. And so it is important for a data collector to be well grounded in in this intellectual commitment, to know what works and not what doesn't work, or what works but not good enough, to ensure that the integration is seamless and well adaptable. And of course, The data collector must be able to bridge ancient wisdom by integrating African tradition and traditions into data-friendly format. We must say that this is the most difficult part of the work, and we encourage future research endeavors to begin to look in this direction to sort of further close the gap and of course, make sure that African traditions become more in tune with the emerging technologies. And so, thank you so much for listening to us. Please do put your questions in the comment below and in the chat below, and then leave your comments. Thank you.